I'm J.R. Butler, co-founder of the Shift Group, and you're listening to Merchants of Change. This is a podcast about transferring the skills and behaviors we acquire as athletes into being a professional technology salesperson. Each week, we'll introduce you to a top performer who will help us understand how they became professional merchants of change. What's up, kid? How we doing, Kelly?
Doing great, JR. Doing great. How are you?
I'm good. It's great to meet you. I'm super excited for the episode today. So I don't know if you've gotten a chance to listen to any episode, but our audience is really, new sellers and people that are considering a career shift into sales, and then also a lot of folks that are early in their career, kind of picking up tips. And our entire company is focused on helping, former elite athletes, so college, professional, Olympic athletes, as well as military vets. But our focus is helping these folks become elite sales professionals. And all of our guests are like you, former athletes. And we like to start with their sports career, talk about their transition, and then we get into kind of some thoughts and beliefs that they have around successful salespeople. So want to start with your sports career. Is that cool?
Absolutely.
I love it. So field hockey, I'm an ice hockey guy. And I've always loved field hockey, except I'm a lefty. So I kind of take that a little personally. You can't be a lefty in field hockey, but what are some of your favorite memories of growing up playing field hockey?
Yeah, to your point, it's not the most well-known sport. I think certainly in New England, a lot of ice hockey players around, but it served me really well in my career. And some of my favorite memories, as I think about, my career, absolutely around teammates. You have like those great wins and really the heartbreaking losses that you tuck away, but the memories with teammates that, whether it's bus trips, hotels, travel, whatever it may be, moments on the practice fields, big moments in games as well, but always the teammates. And those are the people that, stick with you for the rest of your life. So, the games, the wins and losses, those come and go, but, the teammates are the ones that are going to be around for a while. So absolutely, just great memories with teammates throughout the years.
I get to talk to a lot of college athletes now, and I always tell them, I'm like, listen, the goals, the assists, the wins, like all that stuff is cool, but like I promise you someday you're going to be sitting in my seat and your number one thing you're going to miss is like I call it the locker room. It's like being around your friends every single day, all day. It's the hardest part, I think, when you lose sports.
Oh, it was the thing that I was fearing and dreading the most about leaving sport was, you like to compete and stay active, but losing those relationships. So I echo your sentiments 100%.
Yeah. When you look back at like some of your favorite teammates, like what are some of the traits and characteristics that a lot of those favorite teammates shared in your mind?
I think a couple things. I mean, very, very fortunate to be a part of some really talented teams. So with talented teams comes talented teammates. So people that were very good at what they were doing. And I think that a lot of what comes there is being a competitor, being someone who's really passionate about, doing all that you can to be successful on the field. A lot of levels of loyalty to not only the sport, but to each other, right? Being a part of a team, I think, especially as you're growing up through middle school, high school, collegiate level. And then for those that are lucky enough to play beyond that, there's a lot of distraction in life and a lot of stuff that goes on in life that can quickly derail goals on an athletic arena, whatever the arena may be. And so, people that are really committed and dedicated to the goals that you have as a program or an organization. Some of the best teammates that I had are the ones that were able to do all of those things, but at the end of the day, also loyal from a friend perspective. When you really, I think, care about your teammates as friends and family, you can create something really powerful and really special on the athletic field, ice, arena, track, whatever your sport may be. So those are, some of the teammates that I think about absolutely possessed and encompassed all of those things.
The best teams I ever played for, it was everybody played for each other and like with each other. Like that's what it was about, right? And I think, we work with some programs where the path is going to professional, but I think one of the fortunate parts of like, I played hockey at a smaller D1 school. None of us thought we were going to be in the NHL. So we knew like this was going to be like the big thing. So we all really played for each other because that's all we had, really. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, and hockey has the NHL. Field hockey is, we don't have a big, pro league or anything like that. So yeah, absolutely. You kind of, college was it. College was the pinnacle. Yeah, there's an international or national team, but that's, not a lot of players get that opportunity. So it's, you definitely want to milk it for all that you can in college, for sure.
Totally. How do you think your Wake Forest teammates would describe you from when you were playing?
And a couple different things would come to mind there. I think a fierce competitor, like for sure. I think that anyone that plays at the collegiate level, you got to have some of that competitive sort of intrinsic drive about you. Pretty gritty, pretty determined player. And I was someone who talented on the field, right? Had a really successful collegiate career, but I think that would be, something that people would say, but they would also talk about the kind of teammate that I was in regards to how I treated people and making sure that I really, had captain titles and things like that. And really making sure that you take care of and you wrap your arms around the whole program, not just the starters, not just the people that are often in the press or in the media or, people that are scoring all the goals or, have all the great stats that are often in the headlines, but making sure that you recognize, and I thought we did a really nice job and I was a part of that in recognizing that it's a full effort, right? You need players that are showing up to practice day in and day out and are really strengthening the program, although they don't get a lot of time come game day. Those are some of the most critical players that you can have on a team. And if you have a program that can recognize that, if you have teammates that can recognize that, I think that is something that I'm pretty proud of when I think about my college years. Is really my ability and some of the people that led alongside of me is our ability to think about the greater group and not just focus on the quote unquote most talented people. We've all probably been a part of teams that had a lot of talent, but the full potential of that team was never tapped into. Maybe it was egos or, one of the million things that can get in the way. So, I think that clicks, divides with playing time, starters, non-starters, all that. I think we did a great job of making sure that didn't come into play and did not impact our ability to be extremely successful on the field.
So you won't say it about yourself, but I'll say it. That's leadership, right? Is like making everybody feel like they're an important part of the team. And, that's what great teams have. Everybody has a role, right? And not everybody's going to be on the score sheet, but everybody that's contributing needs to be part of that greater group. That's awesome. What do you, when you look back at your field hockey career, what's like the accomplishment that you're most proud of, would you say?
I think when I look back on my career, the most successful point in my career was in college. I did play at the international level, and it wasn't probably the pinnacle of my career. I'd say that more so happened in college. I was very fortunate to be a part of a 3-time national championship team. When you're going through it, it's every kid's dream is to go play in college or play at the Olympic level and win, right? Whether you be a gold medalist, whether you're winning national championships. And I went on to Wake Forest and we did it 3 times in a row. And I kind of going through it, you don't really realize the magnitude of what's happening. So although those were all wins and championship seasons that we had, it takes a really special group of people to do it once and then to do it a second and a third time. I mean, you look back on it and it's very much shaped a lot of my life and very much shaped, the people in my life, what I value in my life. And you kind of didn't even realize it was happening at the time. So for me, those are memories that, such a small percentage of college athletes get to win a national championship and even a smaller get to do it twice. And then very fortunate to be in, I don't know if rare air is the right word, but in a rare crowd of people that have done it 3 times. So just an incredible thing to reflect back on.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, unreal. Like it's you see that type of, you don't see that type of success that much anymore with the parity that's been created in college sports. I mean, I think UNC is a bit of a wagon now, but
yeah.
But again, that's a rare accomplishment. And speaking of UNC, right? They just had their top player there, Aaron Matson, took the coaching job, right? And it sounds like you were kind of on a similar path, right? You stopped playing, and a lot of people when they go through that transition think, well, I want to stay close to the game. I'm going to get into coaching. You did that. You came up to UMass, and then you went to Louisville. And you coached for like 6 years at the collegiate level. So obviously you were enjoying it to do it for as long as you did, but like what made you start exploring alternative career paths? Because we work with a lot of coaches too.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for me getting into coaching, I wanted my playing career at the international level to probably be a little bit longer than it was, and was rehabbing a significant injury. My parents lived near UMass. So the head coach there said, hey, why don't you come and be a part of our staff? You can still play on the national team. So 6 years of actually coaching is probably condensed down into a lot fewer seasons that I was there, but it was a really powerful way to transition away from being on the field and actually playing, was to be able to coach. So really thankful for that time in my life to be a bit of a transitionary period away from leaving all you've known for most of your life, is to be involved in sport and be involved where you're actually competing versus coaching. And for me, when I was in coaching, I liked it. To be honest, it wasn't something that filled whatever bucket you're looking to have filled as much as I would have liked it to. And I was incredibly fortunate to be a part of a program where, I was able to start thinking about what else do I potentially want to do, while being supported by a coaching staff that wasn't kicking me out the door while I sort of figured life out a little bit with what next steps were going to look like. So for me, it was driven a little bit more by passion and feeling a little bit of a lack of passion for what I was doing. And also a bit of a turning point of like, this is an opportunity to go do something completely different. I had all my network and all my ties had been in sport for my whole life. And it felt, risky. It was scary. It was uncomfortable to make that step. But in my heart of hearts, I knew that I wanted to do something a little bit different. So that sort of got the ball rolling for what is it that I want to do next. And
I guess like, where did sales come into play? Like, how did you find your way into a sales career?
Yeah, I started to, really think about what is it that I want to do. And I will tell you, I'll be very bluntly honest. If you said to me when I started this search, after making the decision that I wanted to do something outside of coaching, if you said you're going to land in sales, I would have said, no, that is not going to be where I'm going to land. My perception of sales was not great. It was, I think the perception of sales of maybe a little bit of the used car salesperson, just trying to jam something to someone that maybe they don't need or they don't want, or maybe it's not the right quality or whatever the case may be. And as I started to think about things that I did want and things that I was good at, I spent a while thinking about it and asked people questions. And I didn't know anyone super well that worked at the company that I'm at. And, was introduced to it through someone that was like, hey, I have a relative that seems happy at this company. Why don't you give it a look? I was looking at a number of companies, and, at the time I interviewed at this company, EMC. And when I interviewed there, it felt like a fit, right? And you hear that at a couple different points in your life. One being, if you're an athlete, when you go on a recruiting trip or when you visit a program and you visit a college campus, it's the right fit. And you're like, what does that actually mean? And you don't know what it is until you feel it. And I honestly felt a little bit of that when I interviewed at this company. So for me, it felt like, well, it's sales. I don't really know. My perception of sales isn't great. But everything that this company has outlined really checks a lot of the boxes that I had when I was evaluating a next step away from coaching. So I thought to myself, like, feels a little bit too good to be true. And hopefully that's not the case. So thought, hey, if I get an offer there, I'll take the job. And ultimately that happened. And I've been at the same company for 10 years. So, what they told me was going to happen on my interview day. I definitely experienced that throughout my time at the company. And so it's been great to be a part of, and very unexpected path for sure.
We've interviewed a lot of people that started their career at EMC. We just had a guy on last week where our episode today is that we launched publicly is Mark Thurman, who started his career after PTC at EMC. Mm-hmm. It's such a phenomenal foundation for a sales career. It's so good. And I love, the guy we interviewed last week's been there for 13 years. So obviously you can have a ton of success there. There's so much you can do. Do you think, looking back, like coming from assistant coaching, do you feel like you got a little taste of selling? Because I see that a little bit.
In an indirect way. And when you're coaching, you don't really think of it as selling. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that there are so many elements of life that do involve some level of a sale or a sales pitch, right? And a lot of people think of sales as this traditional transaction of goods exchange for currency. And there's so many ways that sales happen out there where it's not this like traditional path of what we think of when we think of a sale. And you think about coaching, you think about, if you're coaching at the collegiate level, there are a number of other schools out there that also offer your sport, that are also quite competitive, that are also recruiting the same student athletes that you may be looking at. So how do you begin to do things that differentiate your school as almost a product, right? Where it's your program, the school from an academic perspective, maybe it's facilities, the coaching staff, the team, the success that the team's had, what's going to be happening in the future. So there's this element of persuasion and influence. There's an element of being consultative. There's an element of making sure that it's the right fit for what that student athlete that's being recruited is looking for, and making sure that it's the right culture fit. Is it the right dynamic from a family perspective? Their parents or guardians, you want to be building relationships with them as well. And so I think that there are a lot of elements that, as I was going through it, you don't really even realize you're building some of these skills that as you do transition, or for myself, as I transition into a traditional sales job, paid tremendous dividends for me.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head on the macro level of getting the right candidate to come to the school. But I also think I always think about coaching on the micro level of at the end of the day, your job as a coach is to influence, motivate, and educate your player hey, here's the program, here's the process, here's the skill you need to work on, and here's why. I mean, really in a deal as a salesperson and as a sales leader, that's what you're doing every single day. So yeah, the product might be different. You're trying to sell in hockey, it might be a power play or a certain offensive play, but that's what you're doing every day is influence, motivating, and educating people.
Absolutely. Spot on. Yeah.
What are some of the memories? If I say, tell me about your first 6 to 12 months in sales, what are some things that pop to your head?
I mean, hearing a lot of no's, it's a grind, right? And it's, I think sales isn't for everyone. If it was for everyone, then, anyone could have a job in sales. I think it's an incredibly lucrative opportunity that a lot of people want, but maybe don't have the skill set for. Maybe they're just not the right fit for it. So I remember in my first several months, it was, challenging, a lot of trial and error. And I had come from a life that I was, from a work perspective, that I was comfortable with. I knew a lot of people. I knew what I was doing. I knew how to position, whether it was myself as a player or coaching, how to be successful. And now you're in something that's really different from the perspective of things that are out of your control in terms of trying to talk to customers. Are they going to actually answer the phone, answer your email, answer you in any way that, customers may engage with you? And it also feels like when you're first getting into a career in sales, that the amount of your skill set that you're showcasing is limited, because it's we're educating you on how to be an effective seller, and we're asking you to start going out and trying those skills. So, you've built all these skills and you can only utilize so many of them as you first transition into sales. And I remember thinking, to myself that if you relate it to being involved in sport, it's almost like preseason, or it's almost like the off season where you're building a foundation, and that foundation is so critical to the future success that you want to have, that if you try to blow through your foundation as fast as you can, the long-term outcome is not going to be a desired outcome. And I have that conversation actually a lot now as I, lead teams at my company around, especially with our student athletes, around, you got to think of it as a journey, right? It's a multi-year journey to become a really effective seller. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. Just as much as you had dreams or aspirations to be a collegiate or an international level athlete, you didn't decide your senior year in high school that you're going to go be a Division I athlete or a Division II or Division III athlete. You've been working on it since you could probably walk or run around, and you've been building skills for over years and years and years of time. And that's similar to what happens when you make that professional transition. So I think I had to really trust that perspective and trust that, there's a lot of things a lot of ups and downs in sales. How do you keep your emotions in check and stay as level-headed as you can, and trust that you're building a skill set for a longer term outcome, that, you really got to work to have these building blocks in place for the long term of what you want to achieve.
Totally. We have like a huge portion of the kids that we work with, I call them kids, but they're more experienced. They're coming from coaching. They're coming from another career, or they, in some cases we have people that played professional sports for 10 years and they're like, well, I just want to go into a account executive job and make 300 grand. And it's like, listen, man, like that's a great goal to have. But if you want to achieve that goal, here's all the skills, habits, and processes that you need to spend some time, like really understanding. Like you experience, like talking about Avamar and backup, deduplicated backup is a different skill than like holding court in a locker room to lead a team out to a win, right? But there's things that'll help you accelerate those skills, habits, and processes, that the new ones that you need to know. But like anything, you got to practice those things with intention over time to get better at them, to earn the right to be that, $300,000 seller. Like that's part of the process, and you can't skip a step. You can't. They're lucky to have you. I guess, like, I'm curious to get your answer to this. So pretend you couldn't hire this person at Dell EMC. But if a Wake Forest senior called you and they're thinking about getting into sales, how are you advising them to select a company to start their career? Like, what are the characteristics that you're telling them to look for?
I think a couple things that come to mind. And one of the things that you mentioned around people that want to go and immediately be an AE or a field seller, or the most high level seller that you can possibly be day one, I think is, a lot of athletes have been successful. They've accomplished a lot. They're at the top of their game. So they may have a bit of an ego. They have a bit of like, hey, yeah, I've done this before. I can do this again. I'm just going to transition my skill set. And I think that a lot of people coming out of college want to bypass developing and bypass building that foundation. So if I was talking to someone that was thinking about getting into sales and talking about selecting a career, I would really urge and encourage them to want to build a foundation and get developed really, really well, where they're, learning how to understand a portfolio of product, where they're understanding, how do I qualify an opportunity? How do I actually structure a call? How do I open a call? How do I have structure within my conversation that allows me to effectively talk about who I am, why I'm calling? From there, how do I qualify and ask the right questions of that customer, position effectively a solution or a product that may align to that customer's project, pain point, needs, initiatives, whatever may be going on, handle objections throughout that conversation. And then from there, be able to close for some sort of next step. How do I actually learn that stuff? So getting developed. And then from there, being a part of an environment where, you're going to have an opportunity to get at bats, to make mistakes, to have some failures. Companies structured differently around compensation. So questions I'd be asking, one around training and development. What does that look like at your company? Talk me through that. A lot of people coming out of school have to pay bills. So we do think about things like compensation and how am I going to be compensated? Some companies 100% commission day one. Some companies 100% salary day one. Some companies a mix of having a base salary with commission day one. So asking questions around how that may be structured, asking questions around how, current team members are performing, especially when they first come in, based on how they're going to get paid. A third thing that I'd ask a lot of questions about is around promotability. All right. I think that a lot of companies structure things differently with time spent in each role as you do develop and grow as a seller. And I think that that's an important thing to think through is how, if you have goals to become an AE or a field rep or whatever it is that your goals are, what are the steps that I need to take there? And what's the ballpark timeframe that it may take me to get to that point? How realistic is that? As you think through the next 1 to 3 years of your career in sales, what is that going to look like for you? And then from there, asking questions around like just location wise, where do I have to live? I think it's been an interesting time where there are a lot of remote opportunities, but I'm a bit of a believer in, being in the office early on in your career. It doesn't need to be every day, but I think understanding what the company's expectations are for hybrid work, fully remote work, fully in-person work, like what does that look like and how does it align to what you're looking for? So those are a couple things that I'd comment on around, development, the compensation piece, a little bit of that career growth. And then I think the like I mentioned, some of the in-person versus remote element of it. I think early in career, building those professional skills in person is really powerful, especially in sales. And then the final thing is just thinking a little bit about what's that company's culture, not only as a holistic company, but then what's your sales organization's culture and what does that look like? And how does that align to what you may be looking for as a potential seller at that company?
Yeah, I mean, you hit all the notes I agree with, and we're on the same page about remote versus in office. I just think there's so much learning that happens when you're not focused on learning, when you're surrounded by your peers and your leadership, and that gets lost a lot now. It's really hard for me because most of the kids we work with are like, well, I only want a remote job, and I always tell them like, listen, flexibility is definitely a good characteristic of having a career in sales, but that doesn't mean that's where you should start. Like I wish it was considered like something that you could earn, right? Like, which, I think in fact, like this is a good transition because like growing up selling EMC at the beginning of my career, I have a lot of friends that started in the SA program. We've had a lot of guests that started their career there. And that is like, for the most part, when you talk to these folks, when I was working with them, like their goal was to get to the field as quickly as possible, right?
Yeah.
Now you chose a different path and you spent all of your time really like leading and coaching the next generation. Can you talk about like why you took the path you did at Dell EMC?
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of it had to do with my background in sports. Being a part of successful teams and having an opportunity to be able to lead some of those teams, and then leading in the sense of actually coaching teams at the Division I level. Like, there's some of that stuff that's going to go with you come along with you for the rest of your life. Those skills don't just shut off because you're no longer a college athlete or because you're done with sport or you're done with coaching. And for me, as I went through the early couple years of my career as a seller, as an individual contributor at my company, I started to realize that the part of my day that I liked the most was when I was helping my peers, coaching, mentoring, whatever it may have been. And then I started to recognize that there were opportunities to make that my full-time job, right? So, I was like, the field will always be there. And hey, there's an opportunity to get into leadership pretty early on in my career in this company. Let me take that opportunity and see what happens. So for me, a little bit of like, I definitely thought I was going to go through this program and go to the field and be a seller in the field, and then realize that there were leadership opportunities available for pretty early in career sellers. And that was extremely motivating to be able to be in a leadership position at a company that's, a bit out of my comfort zone, if you will, and to be able to come in and make an impact from a leading perspective. I think that the skills of leadership in sport translate incredibly well into leading a team in business, whether it's in sales or some other part of business or just really anywhere else in life. So I think for me, reflecting on walking away from sport, the thing that I did miss was impacting people, and the way that I think leading, coaching, mentoring, developing people allows you to impact people.
Yeah. And I'm sure, like, as you were kind of figuring out what was next, you probably realized that the best part of your day was when you were helping other younger people. And you're like, why can't I make this my job? Right.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of like that, where it's like, man, you have an opportunity to make something that is the favorite part of your day, or among the favorite parts of your day, your full-time job. You're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah. Yeah. I started a company doing it. So
there you go. Right.
Trust me when I relate. So you've spent literally at this point thousands of hours coaching like really brand new sellers. For the young folks that are listening to this and thinking about a shift into sales, what do you think are like the most important habits that because we talk about skills, habits, and processes. To be a lead at anything, you got to have a passion for excellence, for the skills, habits, and processes that make you a lead at that thing. On the habit side, like, what do you think these young sellers should really be thinking about?
I think a couple things. Some of what we've hit on a bit just around when you start off in sales, it's maintaining perspective of like what I'm doing day over day it may not be that glamorous, and I may feel like I have a lot more to offer, but keeping the perspective of what the skill set that you're building, and that you have to maintain some level of repeatability. When I think about, correlation to sport a bit is like, if you want to get fitter, faster, stronger, more skilled, it's not, if you want to do any of these things, it's not going to the gym once. It's repeatably doing the simple, basic things day in and day out that, it takes time to see gains from it. And that's going to be similar in sales, right? Where I think it's just knowing that there's that repeatable nature. I think a couple things to get a little bit more specific. One is around knowing your brief, or knowing the product brief. So what is it that I'm actually talking about, right? And how do when we think about sales, we have really one tool, and that's our voice. So what is the value that I add is through my voice and what I'm saying to a customer, or potentially emailing a customer. So some way, shape, or form, I'm using my voice and using words. So I have to make sure that I'm pretty sharp with what I'm talking about, and not just, hey, like, I'm just going to wing it and see what happens with this customer. Like, making sure that you know your brief, you're practicing, you're getting as consistent and comfortable with the product portfolio that you may be selling as you possibly can. I think with sales as well, it can be a bit of a numbers game, right? Depending on, the company that you work for, the maybe the accounts that you cover, however the company may be structured. But knowing that you could reach out to a customer 10 times and they're not going to either answer the phone or answer their email. And it's having a level of persistence and, repeatability in contacting them. And it's not just like, oh, they didn't answer the phone, or oh, they didn't answer my email. It's like, all right, well, what are we going to do to try to contact them again? So it's, again, that repeatability and a little bit of that just sort of like grit and drive that I think I see really can separate sellers. And then, from there, I think there's a level of, I see our best sellers taking coaching and feedback and applying it as quickly as possible. Athletes do a great job with that because we've been receiving feedback for our whole life. Coaching and feedback is like, one of the things we're most comfortable with. So when you get into a sales environment, I generally see our athletes take that coaching and feedback, apply it very, very quickly. And that gets them to the next step of whatever they're working on that much faster. So, those are just a couple of basics that I would comment on as you think about it. When either getting into a sales career or starting to build some skills, either in college or through programs that you may be working on, is just, the repeatability, the consistency. That is something that I talk about a lot. And a lot of people try to find the shortest path to success. And I'm not sure that many things are wildly successful with shortcuts.
Yeah, I laughed at Know Your Brief because I can hear Billy Scannell's voice saying that. He's been saying that.
And he's somebody who's been in sales for over 35 years, and that man knows his brief better than anyone. And he's still to this day, like, that is You can ask him anything and he's spot on with it, right? And he takes it seriously, and he's it's really important to him. So you see someone like that's been in his career for a really long time, extremely successful, could probably coast, and that's the last thing that you'll see someone like him doing, and it continues to allow him to be successful.
Yeah, I'd really describe what you just talked about as, like, from a habits perspective, as like mindset and like having perspective. Like, those two things are critical. Any specific skills that you feel like young new sellers especially should be spending time and energy on? Like, specifically, you talk about discovery. I think personally, that's my belief, is that's the most important skill you can have in sales. Do you have any others you'd add to that? I think
that's a great one. I mean, I think getting comfortable with being really adaptable, working in the gray space. No two customer conversations are going to be the same. So the more at bats or the more opportunities that you have, the more comfortable you're going to get with, being able to say something to a customer like, "Hey, I've never heard that before. Can you tell me more about that?" Right? It's like, that feels like a really simple question, but one that a lot of people are intimidated to ask because it shows potential vulnerability, or it shows like, I don't know what I'm talking about. And that can be uncomfortable for people. So I think finding comfort in some of those sort of situations can be a powerful thing. I think other things like handling objections throughout a conversation. Customers are going to try to give you every reason as to why they don't want to talk to you. And how do I find ways to overcome those objections and either stay on a call with them or with other resources that I have to continue to understand what may be going on and try to build a relationship with them. So being, someone who has a lot of opportunities with practice and being in those environments, I think it certainly goes a long way. I think that there's a lot in sales that, this phrase gets probably overused, but being comfortable, being uncomfortable. There's a lot of new that happens early on in a sales career. A lot of new skills. You're learning a new language in a really short amount of time. You're being asked to apply that language really quickly with real customers. So that's all uncomfortable. And how do I put myself in a position to just sort of get as comfortable as I can with that and know that it's a part of the process? But yeah, I mean, I think that you mentioned a great one as well with just discovery, asking customers questions that may feel a little bit uncomfortable, but you're getting really meaningful information from them that can help you understand, is this a real opportunity or not? Or, is this something that I want to continue to pursue today? Or is this maybe a call that I have in 6 months from now? Or maybe I'll call them back in a year from now. Because there's no shortage of customers out there. There is a shortage of time. So we want to make sure that we're spending our time as effectively as we possibly can in the right spots with customers that have real buying potential. So what's my ability to figure that out? And that's through some of the discovery stuff that you had mentioned.
Yeah. And I think calling out adaptability as a skill is like really, it's right on, because, especially in tech, right? Like, things change so quickly, right? So yeah, and initially you're going to be adapting a lot, but that never stops, right? Like there's stuff coming out, it feels like now on like a weekly basis that's changing the way you need to talk to customers and talk about your products and things like that. So that is a really critical skill if this is the career that you choose. Curious to know, like, so you get a lot, I'm sure you get a lot of folks, and I know I talk to a lot of folks that are like, okay, fine, I'll be a BDR, I'll be an SA, but I want to get to a closing role as fast as possible. What's your coaching or guidance that you give those types of folks?
I mean, I think that speed can be exciting. We're all humans. Getting recognized to move to the next thing fast feels good. It feels like we're doing the right thing, but also sometimes speed can be it can take away opportunity. And opportunity kind of exists in experience, and experience comes with time, right? So I see sellers all the time that want to fly through things and get to that best job, the highest paying job as fast as possible. And I understand why. But to be really effective at the best jobs that are out there, you need experience. And to have experience, you need to spend time and role to be able to see so many different customer scenarios and to be able to get really effective at, what you were mentioning earlier with discovery and to be able to professionally handle multiple calls day in and day out, week over week, month over month, year over year, right? It's this repeatability and getting really, really good at it. So when you do get to that job, that dream job someday, you feel so prepared for it, because there are going to be things that you never thought were going to be happening in that job that you then have to go learn. You don't want to worry about how to prospect a customer. You don't want to have to worry about how to structure a call. You don't want to have to worry about how to close a deal, when those are things that you should know. And now you're worrying about fine tuning, upskilling, like getting really, really elite at what you're doing, at the highest level. So it's, I don't discredit people for wanting for having ambitions and goals to do things quickly, but I also caution it's got to be a little bit of a balance, because with experience, I think there's a lot of goodness that's baked into experience. And there's really no substitute for getting as many at bats as you can, and that takes time.
Totally. Repetition. It equals excellence, and it also equals confidence, right? And confidence is critical. We talk a lot about mentorship, right? It's a recurring topic with every guest we have. Can you just comment a little bit about like the importance of mentorship, especially for early in your career? And I'd love to hear a mentor that's made a difference in your career and what you learned from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mentorship I think it's a really powerful tool, because it allows you to see what potential there is, right? Whether it's someone that's in a role that you aspire to have, or maybe they're in a different role, but have similar, characteristics, attributes, skills that you potentially aspire to have someday, and hearing some of their story and realizing and recognizing that it wasn't always easy and it didn't happen overnight. And I think that sometimes when we see people that are in powerful roles or, big titles in the business world, or when we look at professional athletes, highest level D1 athletes, you often think like, man, they've got it all figured out. Right. And hearing their story, you realize there's a lot that didn't go the way that they maybe planned it to go, or the way that they wanted it to go. And there's a lot of value in hearing that, because I think it gives people a sense of hope and confidence that, hey, I am on the right path. I have done a lot of things, in a great way. And mentors are there to help continue to empower us and continue to allow us to grow as young professionals. So for me, when I think about a mentor, and I probably didn't really think about her in this way, but was one of the coaches that I work for, the head coach that I work for at both UMASS as well as the University of Louisville. When I was thinking about leaving and having conversations with her about leaving coaching specifically and doing something different, to have someone that's, a head coach in a premier conference that's going to say, hey, I'm going to support you through this. And as long as you're doing your job, I'm going to continue to support you through this. That's like one, powerful leadership, and also just allowed us to have some really, I think, open and honest conversations. And you start to realize like, this feels like a bit of a mentorship that's going on here. So it builds a little bit unexpectedly, but having someone that's had a lot of experience and has done a lot of really, quite frankly, cool things in her life and has a great job, to be able to, sort of help pave the way for me for my next steps, not just boot me when I said I wanted to do something different. That was a pretty cool thing for me. So I think, the word mentorship gets thrown around a lot. And I think that it can be intimidating for people. I think it can be overused. So I think that it's something that, find a couple of people. You don't need to have a million mentors. Find a couple of people that, you click with and that you feel fulfillment from and you're getting value out of. Don't have them just for the sake of having a resume builder, being able to say in an interview that you have a mentor. Do it because you're getting true value, whether it's professional or personal, or maybe a combination of both out of that relationship.
Absolutely. Did you, I'm sure there's so much opportunity. Like, I think you can appreciate this now that you're further along in your career, is like people that have had success, they want to help other people. Right. So like, it really comes down to identifying that person. And then, the onus is on both sides for a great mentor mentee relationship to to have accountability to that relationship. So that's a really good example. All right. So final two questions here. Kelly, we ask every guest these two questions. First one is, if we asked you to highlight one of your skills that makes you elite, what would you say it is in sales specifically?
In sales specifically, I would say my ability to remain calm under pressure. I see a lot of people that get high with the highs. Sales is a series of ups and downs, whether they're on a weekly basis, maybe they're annual, whatever it may be. But riding the highs a little too high, riding the lows a little too low, that is exhausting. So I feel like, honestly, my time being an athlete has allowed me to be a little bit like more calm and composed under pressure. Today leading teams, a lot of people will say to me, like, you are so calm all the time. Like we've never seen you really, really rattled. Like, what is it that's going to really rattle you? And it probably take a lot to really rattle me. But I think that being able to stay composed, right? Not everything's going to go the way that you planned it to. So how do you respond to that? People are watching how you respond to things and are going to draw their reaction or their response based on potentially how leaders are responding. So for me, whether it's in a sales call, if something doesn't go the way you want it to, how am I just rolling with the punches, keep the conversation going, moving forward? Same thing with teams that I lead. Something doesn't go the way that we wanted it to. How do we, maintain this level of composure? But I think it's really important to learn from the highs, like what went well, why did that go well, what are some of the takeaways that we have, and then vice versa from some of the lows that happen. Why did that happen? What could we maybe have done differently? But it's not the end of the world, right? So your career isn't made or broken on one big win. Your career isn't made or broken on one big loss. As a seller, it's a culmination of wins and losses over your career that are going to make you really powerful in what you do. And I think that for me, the elite thing, getting back to the original question, would be being able to remain fairly calm in a lot of situations.
Absolutely. I just remained calm when my office lost power there, by the way. So that was a good example.
There we go. That's awesome. No problem.
I grew up, you talk about constructive criticism, Kelly. I grew up with a high school hockey coach as a dad, right? And he used to preach to us when we were little. He used to always say, listen, a lot of people play hockey, but there's not a lot of hockey players. So like the idea of being a pro was instilled in us really, really early on, right? If you're going to be good at, if you're going to be something, be good at it, right? So we think that the highest praise you can give a salesperson is calling them a pro. What does being a pro mean to you in sales?
I think it's this constant pursuit of excellence. I think it's easy for different milestones to happen and think you've made it. And then there's a bunch of other people there that are chasing you down, whether it's against sports or in sales. There's always talent that's being developed. So, constantly, although yes, you hit milestones, it can get easy for people to get a little complacent. It's constantly this pursuit of excellence. And I think from there's a level of consistency and repeatability. Some of the best sellers out there are the ones that you know what you're going to get from them week over week, month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year, right? Just doing what is necessary and what's required. And those skills are going to change over time and the product's going to change over time. But your commitment, your effort, like all those things that you put into it, when I think about the best sellers out there, they're the ones that are in the pursuit of excellence constantly. They're the ones that are performing in a consistent and repeatable way. From there, I think the final piece that the pros are doing is they're finding ways to fine tune, right? Really fine tune and hone their craft. I think that sales, there is a level of craft that's involved with it. When you think about the difference between, playing, peewee, junior level, middle school, high school, from the pros, it's the very, very fine tuning. It's the pace at which we're operating. It's the speed. It's the accuracy. So everything is that much closer to excellent, that much closer to perfection. I don't think that perfection is ever fully achieved, but it's, that's the difference. The game of basketball, whether you're playing in fifth grade or you're playing in the NBA, it's the same game with the same rules, just the excellence and the consistency and the the fine tuning that happens at that pro level is really the major differentiator.
I love it. That's one of my favorite answers we've ever gotten. The consistency is, I love that. Kelly, this was such a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I know our listeners are going to get a ton out of this. We get another required listening episode for our candidates. So thank you so much for giving us the time. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be here with you all today, and appreciate it. Wish you all the best, and happy to help out any way that I can moving forward.
Thank you so much. This wraps up this episode of Merchants of Change. If you enjoyed this episode, the most meaningful way to say thanks is to submit a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're interested in working with us, please come find us at www.shiftgroup.io.